It was them trying to help Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
From being an
Yes.
asshole. Seth, you're being really mean. Get off Twitter, please. I don't want to.
So nowadays, Seth Rogen is seen as an out-of-touch Hollywood elitist whose main personality trait is, I like to smoke weed. But there was a time where I really enjoyed his movies. His latest projects haven't been that good, but there was an era from the mid-2000s to the early 2010s where he was just on fire. And one of my personal favorite movies during this time was The Green Hornet. I know some people are looking at the title of this video and thinking,
What the fuck are you talking about?
but hear me out. Most people look at the idea and think, Seth Rogen is a superhero? Yeah, no thanks. Because they can't take him seriously as a superhero, but that's the beauty of it. The movie doesn't either. We'll get more into that later, but first, a bit of background. Released in January 2011, The Green Hornet is an adaptation of the 1960s show of the same name, which was an adaptation of the comic book series The Green Hornet. And all I really know about The Green Hornet is that Bruce Lee played Kato, which they give a nod to in the movie several times. You see a drawing of Bruce Lee in Kato's sketchbook, Kato says he's too fast for the camera to catch him, and he even does the 1-inch punch. So that's cool. Michael Garnery was at the helm, who directed a shit ton of music videos and shorts, but his most well-known movie before this point was Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Oh, he also did Be Kind Rewind. Anyone else remember that movie? In the writing department were Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, who collaborated on several projects and still do to this day. Pineapple Express, Superbad, This Is the End, The Interview. They're basically involved in all their projects together to some degree. And in front of the camera we have Seth Rogen, of course, as Britt Reed, Chou as Kato, Cameron Diaz as Lenore, and Christoph Waltz as the antagonist, Chudnovsky, who is just the best character. So the setup is pretty basic and rather simple. Britt Reed is a rich, reckless party boy whose father dies, so he inherits his media empire, which is mainly an independent newspaper company. He then teams up with his late father's badass mechanic to fight crime as the Green Hornet. Now what makes this movie so good, at least for me personally, is the fact that it takes what you expect from a superhero story and flips it on its head. You see, from hearing that setup, you would think the death of his father would cause him to toss his party boy ways to the side and get his life together and start fighting crime for truth and justice. But no. What actually happened was, Kato and Britt were vandalizing Britt's father's memorial statue at his grave because they really didn't like him. And then by chance, they encountered an assault. And so they stopped the lowlives and they decided that they should be crime fighters because it was pretty fun and they seemed good at it. But to protect innocent people from getting hurt by the criminals, they're going to be posing as criminals themselves, acting as the new players in town and taking over the criminal underworld. It's almost kind of the opposite of Arrow Season 1, how Oliver Queen is a reckless party boy who drops that lifestyle to be a hero after his father's death. Here, Britt mostly stays the same douchebag throughout. So that's the first way they play with the expectation of how you think this movie is gonna go. The next change is that Britt may be the Green Hornet, but most of the heavy lifting is done by Kato. He's the one that can fight. He's the one that can drive. He's the one that makes all the equipment they can use. So instead of the hero being in charge of the operation, it's now the sidekick doing it all. And Britt's basically just funding it. And then there's the love interest, Lenore. Since Britt and Kato aren't used to being criminals and not sure how it works or how to go about it, Britt has her do research on the Green Hornet so that they know what to do and what their next move should be. She basically becomes the brains of the operation without her even knowing it. And the cherry on top is that both Britt and Kato have a thing for her, but by the end, neither one of them ends up with her. So the hero doesn't get the girl here. And these are the things that I really like about this movie. It changes up what's expected from this genre, which is pretty refreshing, especially for 2011. Now all that is good, but it needs to have more than just messing with expectations and genre tropes to really be enjoyable, and that's where the action and humor comes into play. I'm gonna start with the action because it's a lot of fun. You get some really good hand-to-hand choreographed fight scenes, mainly involving Kato, and there are a few times where time slows down and you see Kato wreck people in some pretty fun and creative sequences. I remember being more impressed by this 11 years ago, but hey, it's still pretty good. But on top of that, you get some really awesome high-speed chase with the Black Beauty, and what makes these so interesting are the amount of gadgets, equipments, and weapons that the car has. Add a nice spice to these sequences. I really just love seeing this car in action. So overall, it has some pretty fun, solid, and creative action sequence throughout. Now, as far as humor is concerned, it's a pretty typical Seth Rogen comedy, but it's toned down for a PG-13 rating. So if you like that, then you'll enjoy the humor here. I think it's pretty funny overall, but not really laugh out loud hilarious. I actually think the funniest part of the movie is with James Franco in the beginning during Chudnovsky's introduction scene.
Okay, oh, you're scary. Yeah, you're scary.
You just said I'm not.
No, you are.
You said I'm boring. My gun has 2 barrels. That's not boring. And it was very difficult to make.
Overall, I think the humor is fine. There are a few lines that aren't really that funny, but are supposed to be, but no joke really overstayed its welcome. Now all this is good, but it needs one more thing to take it to the next level, and that's when Chudnovsky comes in.
Answer me! What?
Well, what could I do to be more scary?
Chidanowski is the villain, and he's basically in charge of all the crime in LA. All the gangs and drug dealers kick back to him, and when Green Hornet and Kato start wreaking havoc, it draws his attention because it's affecting business. And Christoph Waltz is just amazing in this role. The way he delivers these lines and how throughout the movie he feels burnt out, and like he's behind on the times, so he thinks of a way to reinvent himself. And his bewilderment and reaction to Green Hornet's chaos is just hilarious. It's pretty funny to see. The way he sells it is by not hamming it up too much, but his character is just ridiculous enough to really make him amusing. I think without him, this movie wouldn't be nearly as good. If it were just a normal drug dealer or gang members, then I don't think this movie would have worked as well as it did. By having this comedic but oddly serious, out-of-touch villain makes things just so much more fun. And personally, he's my favorite character in the whole movie. Something else I really like is the pacing. The plot moves along at a pretty brisk pace, and along the way you get some really fun and comedic action. It's nearly 2 hours long, but it feels like an hour and a half. There weren't many dull moments here. And something small that I enjoy are the stylized bits here and there. I mentioned the action and how you get this Kato vision where things slow down, but you also get this red and green filter over the top of the screen while it's in slow-mo. And there's this one small section where they place a bounty on Green Hornet's head, and the screen keeps splitting off as word spreads, following different characters. It kind of reminds me of like spy thrillers from the 60s, and since the original Green Hornet show aired in the 60s, I'm pretty sure this was a callback. I don't know, it's just small little things like that I really do appreciate. It just visually makes things more interesting to watch. Now, I really like this movie, but I can admit not everything about it is great. At around the halfway point, the story starts to focus on uncovering the corruption going on with the DA, and how crime is being hidden from the news for political reasons. And we learn how Britt's father actually died. That stuff is all in the second half of the movie, and quickly becomes the main focus during the third act and final battle. This whole plot point isn't the strongest, because it's not the focus for most of the film. Although they do hint at it here and there, but if you blink you'll kinda miss it. But overall, I don't mind it, but it's easily one of the weakest aspects of the movie. And I've seen people not like this movie for a few different reasons, but the main two I've noticed are, 1, they don't like Seth Rogen or his style of comedy, and 2, as an adaptation, it's actually not that good, because it just takes the concept of the Green Hornet and just does something completely different with it. But since I don't know much about the Green Hornet at all, and not very familiar with the source material, that whole aspect didn't really bother me, but I can understand how someone who is a fan of the Green Hornet wouldn't be a fan of this movie, just considering how they handle the source material. And back when this movie first came out, I was really into Seth Rogen's movies, and his style of comedy, so that complaint didn't bother me either. But if you're not a fan of Seth Rogen, then this movie will have a hard time winning you over. The reviews are below average for both audiences and critics, and it wasn't a major hit at the box office either, bringing in a little over $200 million on a $120 million budget, which would explain why there was never a sequel, even though it's set up pretty well for one. I'm actually really surprised that the audience rating is just as low as the critics rating, because usually it's never that close. But overall, I really liked this movie. The action was fun and creative, I liked how they flipped typical superhero tropes on their head, and Christoph Waltz is really just so damn entertaining as the antagonist. And back when it was released in 2011, I think it was a good alternative to, at the time, young MCU and the darker Batman movies from DC. It was different enough to stand out from what those two companies were putting out at the time. And that's probably why I was drawn to it, because it was something different. So yeah, I like the Green Hornet movie. I liked it 11 years ago when I first saw it, and I still like it today after rewatching it. I already know that several people are just going to strongly disagree with me, and that's understandable. I don't think this is an amazing, groundbreaking movie. I just think that's a very fun movie that does things different enough to really make for an entertaining watch. But that's just what I think. So leave a comment, let me know, what do you think about the Green Hornet? Do you hate it? Is it a hidden gem? Leave a comment, let me know. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, go and drop a like on it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.
You know, it's not always about the or the da or the onii-chan. Sometimes it's just about the
Degenerates like you belong on a cross.